Hey, what's up, YouTube family? It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. Yes, it's black people here in Nebraska. Today, we're going to read a chapter out of a book that I have that's called Nature Knows No Color Line. The author is J.A. Rogers. You can also get this book on archive.org for free, just like I'm giving it to you now. You can attain the same book with the same information for free. So, this chapter is called The Negro as Moor, Negro Ancestry in Aristocratic European Families. 7 years after the capture of Gibraltar, the Moors invaded France and conquered or overran most of its southern province or portion. They probably went as far east as Geneva. Switzerland was then part of France. In 732, they reached Tours, 2 days' march from Paris, but were beaten back by the Christians under Charles Martel. They remained in southern France, however, until 1140, principally in the Camargue in the Western Riviera, which is still known as La Petite Africa, Little Africa. In 838, they took Marseilles. In 842, Arles, aided by fellow Muslims from the east. They captured Sicily in 837 and took 1 million pieces of gold. In 846, they invaded Italy, seized Rome, plundered the Vatican and St. Peter's Cathedral, and carried off immense wealth in gold, jewelry, tapestry, and paintings. Later, with the Jews as intermediary, they sold back much of this loot to the Pope. In 982, they defeated the flower of Christendom under Otto II of Germany. Unmixed Negro troops, most of them from Ethiopia and the Sudan, furnished a large part of the Moorish or Saracen troops. Thereafter, they dominated most of Italy for years and parts of it until the 13th century, when they were swamped by further white invasions from the north. Gradually, they were absorbed into the Italian population, even as the Africans brought in by ancient Romans had been. In Africa, the Moors continued to be a leading power, and to little extent in India also. They dominated the Mediterranean and the North Atlantic and plundered the coasts of Western Europe and the British Isles. They even conquered and ruled parts of Scotland. David McRitchie, eminent British archaeologist, says, so late as the 10th century, 3 of these provinces were wholly black, and the supreme ruler of them became, for a time, the paramount king of Transmarine Scotland. Here's a quote. We see one of the black people, the Moors of the Romans, in the person of a king of Alban of the 10th century. History knows him as Kenneth, sometimes as Dub, and as Niger. We know as an historical fact that a Niger El Dub has lived and reigned over certain black divisions of our islands, and probably white divisions also, and that a race known as the Sons of the Black succeeded him in history. Welsh traditions, he says, tells also of these black people, and the legends and the history of the Scottish Highlands are both witnesses to the existence of a purely black people there. With then the most powerful navy, the Moors preyed upon shipping in the Atlantic. Listen, let's read that again. Within the most powerful navy, the Moors preyed upon shipping in the Atlantic, capturing the passengers and sailors and selling them into slavery in Africa and Islamic lands of the East. A veritable terror reigned in the Mediterranean, says George Hardy. They ravaged the coast of Portugal, Spain, southern France, and went as far as Britain. In 1631, they attacked Baltimore Castle, Ireland, and their leader, Black Ali Crusa, carried off Mary, daughter of Sir Finan O'Astrical. Ali Crusa, native of Morocco, had been a slave of O'Driscoll. Escaping back to Morocco, he returned and surprised the castle. Chambers says, captivity among the Moors of the northern Africa was no uncommon fate for Scottish mariners. He tells of a number of them sold as Salé Morocco in 1636. George I, in his speech from the throne October 19, 1917-21 mentions the great number of many subjects delivery in slavery, a result of his treaty with Mullah Ismail, Emperor of Morocco. So many whites were being taken into slavery. Listen to that. So many whites were being taken into slavery in Africa that in 1150, a religious order, the Trinitarians, were founded to free them by purchase. For the next 3 centuries or more, collections were taken up in the churches for that purpose of freeing them. Wow. One of those freed was Cervantes. There's a reason to believe that there were Negroes in Britain before Julius Caesar. Irish folklore mentions a small black people, the Firbolg. These might have been prehistoric Bushmen, pygmy flint instruments, Negrito skulls, and Grimaldi relics have been found in Scotland. A very ancient British saying, according to Burton Stevenson, is black as a blowman, black as a blackamoor. Godfrey Higgins, Gerald Massey, and David McRitchie have written of these ancient British Negroes. Ancient British Negroes. What we do know also is that the Phoenicians, a Negroid people, did mine tin in Cornwall, and the Egyptians went to Britain before the Romans. Gerald Massey gives abundant proof, including Egyptian words in ancient British languages. The Silures, or Western Britons, mentioned by Tacitus of the 1st century as having dark skin and usually curly hair, or very likely of Phoenician or Egyptian descent. Ancient Welsh folktales certainly do mention black people, unmistakably Negroes, and the story of Peredur and I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher this, Mabinogion. The blacks mentioned there might be sealers. Another ancient Welsh poem, Gwad Lud Moor, tells of rivalry between white and black, Moor and Moor. Rome had Negroes, Ethiopians, in their armies in Britain, and the worship of the black goddess Isis with her Egyptian Negro priests followed the Roman armies there. Wow. Hyde was quoted to that effect in chapter 1. Oaksmith mentions also an African tribe as at Moresby. Indeed, with so many Negroes in her population, there must certainly have been in some in her occupation forces in France, Belgium, Germany, and Holland. Here and there, some Negro skulls have been found at Cologne, also near the Roman city of Nida. There a Negro phallic deity was found. Septimus Severus, one of the leading conquerors of Britain, was an African. How much, if any, Negro strain he had, we do not know. In 668, Pope Vitalian appointed a Negro, Hadrian, Archbishop of Canterbury, but he declined, presumably because of age. Theodore, an Oriental, was named in his place, and Hadrian, see right here, went as his mentor. Ireland had a Negro bishop, Saint Demon the Black, who died in Ulster in 658. Sir Walter Scott has 6 Negro trumpets in Ode Mortality, in white dresses, richly laced and having massive silver collars and armlets. In one of his introductions to Ivanhoe, he replied to his critics by confirming that there were Negroes in Britain in the Middle Ages. Moor, the race, as it occurs in European heraldry, always means Negro. Moor's head was buried, says buried, is the heraldic term for the head of a black or Negro man. Abbott says Moor's head, the head of a Negro. Edmondson says similarly, and this definition is etymologically correct. The Greeks, as was said, used morus to mean black or dark, and the Romans used it for Negroes. Woolly hair, like a Moor's, says Marshall. To Claudian, Moors, Ethiopians, and Negritians, that is Negroes, were one and the same. He speaks of the Moors who dwell beside the waters of Gur, most famous of the rivers of Ethiopia, that overflows its banks as if it had been another Nile. The Gur referred to here is the Niger or Niger. Sir William Smith says the Moors were known in the Alexandrian dialect as blacks, and that the Moors must not be considered a different race from the Numidians. Agir says that to the Greeks, Romans, and Gauls, the Moors were known as the black people. He adds the word Mauritania, I'm butchering that, sorry, inhabited by the black populations, was later called Nigritia or Negro land. Moor, therefore, was the equivalent of Negro. The word Moor or Moor signifies a primitive black population, since, therefore, the Romans invaded Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, and other parts of Europe. They undoubtedly took the word Moor, meaning a black people, with them. In fact, so common was the use of Moor for Negroes that it is astonishing to find some writers calling Moors a white race. MacRitchie, referring to a passage in Claudian, Ecleves moros, nec falso, nomen pictos, edminut, says now when Claudian wrote, and for a long time after, Maru signified a great deal more than a native of Mauritania. Any Latin dictionary, any old one at least, will tell you that Maurus is a Moor, a blackamoor, or a tawny Moor. And Shakespeare used the word Moor as a synonym for Negro. The Roman Maurus occurs in the European languages as Moor, Moro, Morian, Marian, and scores of other forms. For instance, the Italian dictionary says Moro, Umo Nero d'Etiop, black men of Ethiopia. The Century Dictionary says Moor means blackamoor, hence Moorian, Morisco, Moris. It is much the same in the Teutonic languages. The word Moor in German says stroll, was exactly equivalent to Negro in the time of Othello. Moor for Negro continued to be in general use in England until at least the 18th century. Nathaniel Bailey, compiler of the first English dictionary, 1736, has Moor, French, Moor, Italian, and Spanish, or Black Moor, a native of Mauritania. Dr. Samuel Johnson, 1755, has Moor, Morus, a Negro blackamoor. Mulattoes were called tawny Moors, and sometimes Tanny Moors. Bailey says that there were one born of parents of which one is a Moor and the other of some other nation, or white. Albino Negroes were called white Moors. This later was also a nickname in Spain for Moors. Niger, the ancient African word from which evolved Negro. Niger, Nigra, Nigrium of the Romans started to supplant Ethiop and Moor about the middle of the 16th century. Richard Eden, in his Decades, 1555, says Ethiops, which we now call Moors, Moorians, or Negroes. Diego de Torres, in a work printed in Spain in 1586, said of Mali Muhammad, emperor of Morocco, el cual es negro, who is a Negro. John Harrison of England, in his play, The Tragic Life and Death of Muli Abdallah Malik, late king of Barbary, that is Morocco, printed in 1733, says he was the son of Mali Sidan by a Negro woman, and so by complexion a mulatto. George Peele, in his tragic Battle of Alcazar, played in London in 1588, or before Shakespeare is believed to have written his first play, used Moor and Negro interchangeably. One of his characters in Muli Muhammad, emperor of Morocco, who is mentioned in such passages as, and aids with Christian arms, the barbarous Moor, the Negro, Mali Muhammad, and thunders for vengeance in this Negro, Moor. Christopher Marlowe in Lust's Dominion, or The Lascivious Queen, written before Shakespeare's Othello the Moor, also used Negro and Moor interchangeably several times. This play deals with the illicit love of Eliezer, Prince of Fez, Morocco, with the Queen of Spain, who has a child by him. There goes the Moor, he that makes a cuckold of the Spanish queen. That's the Black Prince of Devils. He is also called the Negro King and the soft-skinned Negro. Richard Brom, in his English Moor, used Blackamoor, Ethiop, and Negro interchangeably in a single page. Ben Jonson, 1602, in his Masque of Lackness, which deals with Ethiopia, says it was famous by the name of Niger, of which the people were called Negrite, now Negroes, and are the blackest nation in the world. It might be noted in this passing that the subject of the queen or other high-born white women in love with a Negro has intrigued storytellers from early times. We find it reoccurring in European literature. In the folklore of the Greek island of Lesbos, the daughter of a king is enamored of a Negro. And that's a good place to stop, I believe. I go over all this information to confirm, and, I enjoy this information. I enjoy reading it to you guys. I enjoy giving it to you guys. But, a lot of people have issues with this. A lot of people don't believe. A lot of people, they just can't fathom that just like there's Black American history, there's Black European history. And they don't want to come to terms with it. But you know what? You don't have to. Because just because you don't come to terms with it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. But these people's stories deserve to be told just like everybody else's. I'm not here saying that anyone is superior over another group. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is their story deserves to be told, and the information deserves to be put out there. And it's the perfect month to do it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this information. Like I said, this is a chapter out of a book called Nature Knows No Color Line by J.A. Rogers. And you'll be surprised of all the history that you'll find. Black history that you'll find, Negro, Moor, whatever history that you'll find in Europe and these places, Wales, Scotland, France. It's all there if you look for it. Another book called Ancient and Modern Britons by David McRitchie. 2 volumes of a whole bunch of information of Black races of people in Europe. So information is there if you want to learn and understand and come to terms with it. If not, it's all good. It's your favorite Black guy from Nebraska. Just as Black people in Nebraska. I'm out. Peace.